All right, let's dive into a topic that can feel, well, super complicated. Bible translations. Why in the world are there so many, and what's the difference between them? Believe it or not, the answer might not be what you're expecting. You know that feeling, right? You're in a bookstore, you see a whole shelf of Bibles, ESV, NIV, NLT, CSB, KJV, and you just think, where do I even start? Well, if you've ever felt that, you are definitely not alone. And it turns out the answer is surprisingly delicious.
Yep, you heard me, potatoes. We are going to use the simple journey of a potato from being pulled out of the ground to becoming a processed snack to make sense of the entire world of Bible translations. Just stick with me here. I promise it's all going to click into place.
So think of this as our roadmap for today, the potato processing line. We're going to start with the most raw original source material and work our way down the line to the most processed, most interpreted versions. And each step, you'll see, represents a totally different way of thinking about translation.
Okay, first up, the raw potato. This is the perfect picture of the original Bible texts, the ones written thousands of years ago in ancient Hebrew and Greek. And just like you probably wouldn't want to just bite into a raw potato, most of us can't just pick up these ancient manuscripts and, read them. They're the real deal, the source, but they're not exactly user-friendly. And this is what we mean when we talk about the source text. We're going to use Hebrews 13:1 as our little test case through this whole thing. You can see the verse right there in its original Greek. So, what happens when you try to turn that into English as literally as you possibly can? Well, you get this. Love of the brethren, let continue. I mean, you can figure out what it means, sure, but it's pretty clunky, isn't it? The grammar just doesn't sound natural in English. And this is the perfect example of why translators can't just swap words. They have to make choices. So let's take that raw potato and do the simplest thing to it. Let's bake it. This gets us to our baked potato translations. These are the word-for-word Bibles. Now, the fancy term for this is formal equivalence, which is just a way of saying the goal is to stick as close to the form of the original language as possible. The exact words, the sentence structure, everything. It's all about what the text says. What's really cool is that even in this baked potato category, there's some variety. On one hand, you've got the plain baked potato, like the NASB 95 or the ESV. They're super, super literal, which is great, but sometimes they can feel a little dry. On the other hand, you have the dressed baked potato, like the CSB. It's still very literal, but they've adjusted the grammar just enough to make it flow better. Add a little butter and salt. And you can see that difference so clearly with our example verse. The super literal NSB 95 says, "Let the love of the brethren continue," which is almost identical to that clunky phrase from before. But the CSB just smooths it out a tiny bit to, "Let brotherly love continue." It seems like a small change, but it makes a big difference when you're reading. Okay, time to move further down the processing line. Now we're getting into what you might call potato products. Think French fries or potato puffs. These are the thought-for-thought translations. The technical name is dynamic equivalence, and the goal here is totally different. It's not about the original words, it's about creating the same feeling or impact on you today that the original text had on its first readers. It's all about what the text meant. So for translations like the NLT or the NIV, the main focus isn't on a one-to-one word swap. It's about capturing the original idea and putting it into natural, modern English that we can all understand easily. Now the trade-off's pretty clear. You lose a little bit of that word-for-word precision, but you gain a whole lot in readability. And then you get to the very end of the line. We're talking potato chips maybe. This is where you find the highly interpreted paraphrases, with the Message being the most famous example. Now, our source is pretty clear on this. These aren't really translations you'd use for deep doctrinal study. They're designed to give you the overall vibe and feeling of a passage in really contemporary language. And this slide just lays it all out so perfectly, doesn't it? I mean, look at the journey of this one little verse, Hebrews 13:1. It goes from the CSB's crisp, "Let brotherly love continue," to the NLT's warm and friendly, "Keep on loving each other as brothers and sisters," all the way to the Message's creative take, "Stay on good terms with each other, held together by love." 3 totally different ways to say the same thing. Isn't that fascinating? So, the million-dollar question, how do you choose? Well, it really all boils down to that classic trade-off, accuracy versus readability. The truth is, there's no single best Bible for every person in every situation. The right one for you really truly depends on what you're going to use it for. Now, I have to share this because it's just too good. Our source author has let's just say, a very vivid picture for the King James Version. They compare it to an old, shriveled, rotting potato that's growing eyes.
Their point is that while it was the perfect potato 400 years ago, today it's just hard for most of us to even recognize as a potato. Again, that's just their very colorful take on it.
So here's the bottom line. The best way to choose is to just ask yourself, what's my goal here? Am I doing a deep dive, a formal study where I need to be as close to the original Greek and Hebrew as possible? Then maybe a baked potato is what you want. Or am I just looking for something to read every day that's inspiring and easy to connect with? A potato product might be perfect. You just have to match the potato to the purpose.
For what it's worth, the author of our source material, after looking at this whole spectrum, lands on the Christian Standard Bible, the CSB. In their view, it just hits that sweet spot. It's that dressed baked potato. It gives you that word-for-word accuracy, but it's still smooth and readable in today's English. But in the end, the choice is totally yours. Understanding this whole potato spectrum just gives you the power to pick the right tool for the job. So the next time you're looking at a Bible, you can just ask yourself, what's on the menu today? Am I in the mood for a baked potato, or am I craving some potato chips?